The contact came in at 0311 watch rotation, and the first thing Fleet Assessor Derev Ons said when he looked at the readout was nothing. He just stood there with his hands braced on the console edge and looked at the single pale marker on the long-range grid. One blip, one mass signature, drifting at 0.04 standard velocity on the Hegemony's primary transit corridor. And after a moment he said very quietly, "Is that it?" I was weapons third aboard the Sollani Hegemony cruiser, Syndral Advance. Fourth ship in a line of 6 running corridor patrol. I had been on watch for 2 hours. I had logged 43 routine contacts in that time. This was not routine, because the marker carried a heritage code. Human, Terran registry, old pattern. Single hull, said our scan lead, Verith Kahl, not looking up from her instruments. Mass reads at approximately 42,000 standard units. No active shielding detected. Drive signature is degraded. I'm reading intermittent output. Possible thruster malfunction. The hull is not on any current Hegemony threat registry. Derev Ons straightened up and looked at me. And I will admit that I smiled. We all did. 42,000 standard units is a freighter-class displacement. A single freighter-weight vessel, drifting, no shields, degraded drive, sitting in the middle of the Hegemony's most heavily patrolled trade artery, like a tired animal resting on a road. The Sixth Armada was 19 days behind us on the same corridor. 400 ships. The Hegemony's forward presence in the outer transit lanes. We were their eyes. We were 6 cruisers with a combined mass displacement 20 times what that lone marker represented. "Hail it," On said. We hailed it 3 times. No response. "It could be derelict," Verith offered. "Then we'll board it," On said. "And if it isn't derelict, we'll explain to whoever is inside that they have entered a Hegemony-controlled transit corridor without registry clearance. And they'll pay the fine, and they'll go home." He turned to the helm. "Close to visual range. Keep the other 5 ships in line formation." We closed over the next 40 minutes, and the whole time the contact just sat there on the grid, barely moving. No weapon signature, no active systems beyond the faint drive flicker. I watched it the way you watch something that has already stopped mattering. I remember thinking that if this was the most dangerous thing I saw in a 12-rotation patrol, I would go home satisfied. Visual range gave us the hull. It was dark, not the purposeful dark of stealth coat, the dark of age, of exposure, of a surface that had seen more distance than paint could remember. The geometry was wrong in a way I couldn't name immediately. Not the smooth, utility curves of a freighter, not the hard angles of a warship, something in between, something that didn't have a clean category in the part of my brain that identifies threats. Long. Wider than its length suggested it should be. Studded at intervals with closed-door housings that I initially read as cargo airlocks. They were not cargo airlocks. "Scan at full resolution," On said. Verith ran it. She ran it a second time. Then she said, in a tone I had never heard from her before, flat and careful, tone of someone reading a number aloud that they do not yet believe. "Fleet Assessor. I'm getting a secondary mass distribution that doesn't match the primary hull profile." "Explain." "The hull exterior reads at 42,000 units. That's consistent." She paused. "The interior density reads at 460,000 units. Silence on the bridge. That's a 10-to-1 packing ratio," someone said from the navigation station. "That's not possible for a single continuous hull." "It isn't a single continuous hull," Verith said. She looked up then, and I saw it in her face. Not fear yet, just the particular stillness that precedes fear, a moment where the mind is still collecting data and the body already knows. "The secondary signatures are discrete, individual. I count." She stopped. She rechecked the screen. "I count 312 separate mass signatures nested inside the primary structure. Each one reads at approximately 1,400 standard units." She looked at On, Fleet Assessor. 1,400 units is a light strike hull displacement. Nobody said anything. 312 light strike hulls, I said, because somebody had to say it out loud to make it real. "Folded inside a freighter-class outer shell." "Dormant," Verith said. "All 312 are reading cold. No power, no active systems. The outer shell is what's broadcasting. The shell is the only thing with a drive signature." She was speaking faster now. "It's been presenting as a single drifting vessel. We've been looking at the wrong ship for 40 minutes. On opened his mouth to give an order. I still don't know what the order was going to be, and the contact's drive signature stopped flickering. It didn't go dark. It went smooth, clean. The intermittent malfunction pattern that we had read as a damaged thruster resolved, in the space of 4 seconds, into a full output burn profile. Not a freighter burn. Not a wounded ship limping in place. 312 separate power signatures ignited simultaneously. The outer shell split along pre-scored seams. I watched it on the visual feed, the long dark hull peeling apart from the inside like something shedding a skin that was never its own. Panels falling away in controlled trajectories. Not debris, not damage, but deliberate release. Each panel was already moving on a vector. Each panel carried a thruster package. They were never hull plates. They were never armor. They were the last 312 dormant hulls. And they had been riding inside the shell for the entire 40 minutes we spent closing to we thought was an easy boarding. The Sollani Hegemony's doctrine for contact engagement has one foundational assumption. No, you know what you are facing before you close to weapons range. You do not close to weapons range against a force you cannot quantify. That assumption requires your scanner to be counting accurately. We had been counting wrong by a factor of 312. The first ship in our patrol line, the Kessel Forward, had positioned herself 600 units off the contact's bow as the boarding approach lead. Standard doctrine. Close enough for a hard lock, far enough for maneuvering room. The problem with that position, in retrospect, is that 600 units is exactly inside the deployment radius of a light strike hull moving at full emergency burn. By the time the Kessel Forward's weapons officer had recalibrated his targeting to account for not one but 312 new contacts, there were already 47 of them inside her minimum engagement threshold. She lasted 9 seconds. The second ship in our line, the Vedral Span, attempted an emergency about turn and was flanked before she completed the rotation. The third and fourth ships, the Marin Cut and the Sindral Advance, my ship, held formation and fought. The fifth and sixth ships attempted to run. I spent the next 14 minutes doing what my training told me to do. I ran the targeting solution for the Sindral Advance's main battery. I fired, kept firing. I want to be precise about this, because the archive record will show it. We hit targets. We destroyed 11 of the 312 hulls in those 14 minutes. 11. Our line of 6 scored a combined kill count of 29. The Sixth Armada, when it arrived 19 days later, found the debris field still expanding. 400 ships came up the corridor and found what was left of 6 hegemony cruisers and 29 small human hulls scattered across 800 cubic units of space. The remaining 283 hulls were gone. We could not tell from the wreckage which direction they had dispersed. Our beacon logs, what we had managed to transmit, gave the Sixth Armada's fleet commander enough to reconstruct the engagement sequence. He reportedly looked at the reconstruction for a long time, without speaking. Then he asked how large the outer shell had been, the freighter-weight hull that had presented as a single drifting vessel for 40 minutes while 312 warships folded inside it waited in the dark. When he was told, he asked the question again. He seemed to believe the number had been misread. It had not been misread. The archive entry for the incident was filed under the classification Contact, Undetermined Doctrine. The official record lists 1 human vessel detected, mass signature 42,000 units, heritage code Terran. That is technically accurate. That is what the scanner showed us. What the scanner did not show us. What the scanner was not designed to show us, because no hegemony scanner doctrine had ever been written to look for it, was 312 hulls that had been dark and cold, patient for longer than the patrol had been in space, waiting inside a shell that looked exactly like nothing worth worrying about. The Sixth Armada never came back up the corridor. That part of the record is not classified. They just never came back.